Hello and good morning. Welcome to Virtual Coffee. I'm Cheryl Leong from the Growth Hub, and I hope we're all doing well. I know a few of us out there have been in lockdown for more days than we would like, but it's beautiful in Sydney, and I'm really, really glad to have with me today on Virtual Coffee Michelle Bowden, who is the creator of Persuasion Smart Profile. And we're going to be talking about how persuasion smart are you? And there are a few people out there going, "What do you mean by persuasion smart?" And that's something that we're going to address today. Michelle is also the author of How to Present, and she has been and she's developed a toolkit called the Persuasion Toolkit. So we're going to be using the word persuasion quite a bit. But let me invite Michelle down to have virtual coffee with me, and we can talk a little bit more about how persuasion and presentation come together. Michelle, how are you doing?
Hi, Cheryl. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone.
Hello. It's a fantastic day. I love the colors and the vibrance there. Spring has definitely come. Michelle, tell us. A lot of marketing now is around building personal brand, and even as a business owner myself, I realize how much of that personal brand is about how you're presenting yourself. And so you teach a lot about like how to present yourself, but in a persuasive manner and that is of influence. Talk to us about what this concept of persuasion smart or persuasiveness is about.
Sure. Thanks for asking. So, the Persuasion Smart Profile is a psychometric assessment tool that it's taken me 10 years to create. I have been a keynote speaker for what feels like about 100 years, and particularly specializing in persuasive presentation skills in business. So I help all sorts of different people be persuasive, from people that are trying to persuade their boards, people trying to pitch for business. I'm just in the process of waiting to hear about a $700 million deal that I've been helping a pitch team that had 25 people in it to win.
Wow.
I help leaders persuade their people, people persuade their leaders. I help academics persuade for funding. I help scientists persuade around their academic achievements. So I think we're all persuading all the time. And as a presentation skills expert, what I've specialized in over the last 25 years or so is how to pitch your message in a meeting, in an email, in a conversation, even just one-on-one informally in your family, how to pitch that message in a persuasive way so that you are shifting that person or that audience from where they are, which is what we call their current state, to where you want them to be, which is your desired state. And for many, many years, I thought, wouldn't it be great if people could actually assess themselves around this and find out where are you strong and where are you weak when it comes to persuasion. And so, yes, 10 years it's taken me. I've had a team of psychologists and statisticians in the UK, and I've done all the research behind it. And together as a team, we've come up with a way that you can now assess where are you strong and where are you weak when it comes to persuading someone at work. So that's what it means to be persuasion smart.
Can we use this with unruly young children? That's my question.
Yes. Yes. So just yesterday I was working with an amazing company called Peerlight, and one of the ladies in the program's the head of marketing for the organization, and she was talking about getting her child to put on their coat before they go outside, and how do you convince your child to put on
the struggle is real. Yes.
So like we are persuading every minute of every day. And I think, so what happens is there's 4 approaches to persuasion, Cheryl, and most of us are strong in around 2 of them and weak in 2 of them. Now, if the communication scenario, like convincing your child to put on their coat or something simple like that, getting your 16-year-old to clean their bedroom or do their homework or something, study for the HSC, then if the communication scenario requires what is currently your strength, you're just going to talk. You're probably not even going to think too hard about it. You won't realize you're in a persuasive moment. You just think you're in life and you say whatever you would have naturally said. The person listens and does what you ask, and we all move on. And you probably, in retrospect, don't even think of that as a persuasive moment. Then there are moments where the person that you're persuading requires something that you do not have. It is currently your weakness when it comes to persuasion. So you don't have any of the skills in your toolkit to persuade that person in the way they need to be persuaded in order to say yes to you. And so what happens there is that definitely feels like a persuasive moment, and it actually feels like a big fat fail. And it feels sometimes, you know, when you've got this great idea, you think it's just the perfect idea. You talk to your family and friends, they all agree with you it's a great idea. You might even tell your colleagues about it and they go, oh, yes, that's a great idea. But then when you go to persuade your manager, the manager simply can't hear what a good idea it is, and they can't approve it. They can't agree with it. And often that's because the approach they need is currently your weakness. So it doesn't matter how many times you try and say this, you're not going to say it in the right way to persuade that person. So unlike most psychometric assessments where you like Myers-Briggs or DISC or one of those things where you get told, well, this is your profile, good for you, go forth and live your life. This one says, well, it's good to be strong in these areas, so yay, but you also do need to build your persuasive muscle in your current weakness, or otherwise you won't be consistently persuasive across all situations. So it's not good to just have a strength in, say, 1, 2, or 3 of the approaches. You need to be strong across all 4 approaches.
Okay, so the assessment can say not only, hey, this is where you're at, but point you towards the tools to be able to improve on your weaknesses as well.
There are really four steps to becoming persuasion smart. So being persuasion smart refers to having a deep understanding of what is required by the other person in order for them to be persuaded by you, and then you having the capability to adapt or flex your approach so that you can communicate in a way that satisfies that person's need. So what do they need? Give it to them. So there are four steps, if you like, to becoming persuasion smart. Step 1 is you've got to know yourself. You've got to know your own strengths and weaknesses when it comes to persuading other people, even at home. And that's what the Persuasion Smart profile does. So all it's telling you is where are you strong and where are you weak. Step 2 is to then be able to elicit in other people what is it that person needs. You'll naturally persuade people who are like you. What about all the other people? So there's a whole lot of people that we've got to persuade in a normal day that are very different to us and need it to be communicated in a completely different way. So how do you elicit what it is that person wants? And I've actually come up with 4 birds that link to the 4 approaches, so that when you can in your mind attach the metaphor of that bird or the example of that bird to that type, it's easier to pick it in your friends and family and your colleagues and clients. So that's step 2. Step 3 is to build your persuasive muscle. So it's really important that we take that growth mindset. This is the growth hub. So the growth mindset, that kind of idea of 1% every day. You know, if there are so many things you can do to become more persuasive on a daily basis. And if you just think of one thing every day and just constantly striving to be better, then you're going to be more consistently persuasive across the types and approaches. And then step 4 is, of course, then to adapt. So once you've worked out what you are, you know what they are, and you've got the capability to do whatever it takes, then you need to adapt or flex your approach to persuade the person in a way that they will be persuaded. You're not trying to persuade yourself. You already think the idea is good. You're trying to persuade them.
Absolutely. And so how do you distinguish sort of persuasion? Well, I know how you distinguish it, but how do other people distinguish between persuasion and being pushy?
Yes, great question. And this is one of the most commonly asked questions in the field of persuasion. So if you like, influence is the key capability that we're talking about here. And if you imagine influence at the top and then the little lines coming down from influence, there's a continuum. And on one side of the influence continuum is the aggressive approaches to persuasion, which is forcing and directing. On the complete other side of the continuum is the passive approaches to influence, and that is modeling and guiding. So we are influencing, right, Cheryl, even when we don't even know we are. Yeah. As a quick example, you mentioned my colours and everything. I'm not an image expert at all. I dress like this because it's part of my persuasive brand. But you know, I've had situations where I've run a 2-day training course and I've had a flower in my hair both days. And then I hear 3 months later that everyone in that team is now wearing flowers in their hair. And I never once said, wear a flower in your hair. That's a very
Yes.
weird thing to put in your hair, isn't it? A
Yes.
flower.
Yeah.
Like, who wears
Yeah.
flowers in their hair? I'm unique, I think, in the fact that I do that quite a lot. And yet, without even meaning to, all these trainers are now wearing flowers in their hair because I've modeled that's
Yes.
what I do. And I suppose imitation is the best form of
Yes.
flattery.
I think
So,
as well, it must have been built because you must have exuded a sense of confidence in that as well to be able to go, hey, you know, I can wear whatever I want and I'm comfortable with
yeah,
it.
maybe. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just, it's so interesting, but that's what modeling and guiding is, you know.
Mm.
I tell the story often of my youngest daughter. I have 3 teenage daughters, but when the littlest one, who's now 16, when she was about 2, she had grown up in a family where my husband was the stay-at-home dad and I was the income earner for the family. And so Annabelle was raised in a family where the mum goes to work and the dad stays home. And my husband would come up with all these ridiculous sayings every day about the things that he'd done in a day. He'd say to Annabelle, what did you do today? And she'd say, I went to kindy today, Daddy. What did you do? And he'd say, oh, today I was a wizard, or today I was a brown wiggle, or, you know, he'd come up with all this nonsense. And she always believed him. But one day he said to her, well, Annabelle, today I went to work. And she just looked at him and she furrowed up her little hairbrow and she crossed her arms and she shook her head from side to side. And she said to him after thinking for a while, no, you didn't. Boys don't go to work. So
I
again,
love it.
yeah, modeling and guiding. I never set out to say to my 3 daughters, a woman can choose to work. That was not what I was about at all. It was just what works in my family. You see, you're always influencing. You cannot not influence. Even when you don't even realize it, you're influencing the people around you. So that's the passive side of it. And then persuasion's in the middle. So your question is, where does bossiness come in, or where does manipulation? You didn't use that word, but manipulation is something people are really
effectively
sort of fixated on.
Yeah.
That's it. So if you are manipulating when you are forcing and directing, and when you are persuasive, persuasion's in the middle of the continuum. It's the assertive approach. So if you are being truly persuasive, you are meeting the needs of that person or those people that you are trying to persuade, and therefore you aren't being manipulative. You're still influencing them perhaps to your way of thinking, but they need to feel like they also agreed that it was the right decision. You don't want to have that concept of the buyer's remorse after the interaction where they just feel a bit grubby and you feel a bit grubby and you think, oh, God, you know, I think I was probably a bit manipulative there and I said something that I'm not proud of. You know, none of us want to be doing that as we lie in our beds at night. So that's manipulation. It falls into the aggressive approaches for influence.
Okay. And so how do we balance as well? I mean, when we talk about persuasion and presenting, we're thinking in our minds that we have to be talking all the time. Talk, so that the other person is persuaded to do what we want. How do we know when or how do we know how to craft your message so that it is about listening and getting information from the other person so that you're able to persuade more effectively, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I know. So what I'd say about that is that the whole concept of persuasion is that you're giving the other person what they need. You're adapting your approach so that you're pitching it in a way that they can hear it. And you can't do that if you're talking too much. You need to be listening for the cues. Maybe at some stage we'll talk about what the 4 approaches are, but one of the approaches is about connecting, and active listening is an essential component of building rapport with someone. We love to be heard, right? So shush. Shush is the main lesson there, you know. Stop talking and just listen to what the person's saying and read the cues, you know, look at their face, look at their body language, try and really understand where is this person coming from. Did they just frown or do they look weird? Have they got that kind of a
Mm.
dissociated look on their face. Does this mean that they're switched off, or are they switched on? You know, this whole thing is what persuasion is about trying to read that in the other person, and then while you're doing all that, you can't be talking at the same time. So yes,
Yeah.
there's a great value in active listening, which is where you truly listen and don't
Yeah.
talk and don't think about what you're trying to say next, and don't think about what you know, something that's not about this moment. It's about being fully present.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's the word presentation is kind of about being present and presenting. And so how do you do that when you're saying you're going to pitch to a group of people and you don't know them individually and you're pitching your idea? How do you
Mm.
prepare for that so that you can still understand what their needs are and getting feedback?
Mm. There are 3 strategic phases to a persuasive presentation in business. So this is the content that is in my book
Mm.
called How to Present, and it's also in my 2-day masterclass that you can attend live when we all get out of lockdown. So I take this strategic approach to the teaching of presentation skills because, you know, what's really common, Cheryl, is people come to me and they say, I just want to be better with my stagecraft. I want to know what to do with my hands, or I don't like the sound of my voice, or I don't know how to stand, or I don't know how to design good slides. And all of that stuff is not important until you've done some other things first. So I believe that the 3 phases are, and it's not rocket science, everyone that's listening to this right now already knows this. The first phase is analysis. Analysis is where you work out, what am I trying to achieve as the presenter? So in your example of a pitch, what are we trying to get them to buy? And also, what does my audience need to hear from me? And there's a formula. There are many formulas, in fact, that great speakers follow in order to be persuasive and effective in the way that they do what they do. So there is, in fact, a formula. It's called the 5-step analysis formula, and it takes you, the 5 steps, so it takes you through the 5 things you've got to think about in order to work out what is the current state of the various individuals in the audience, and what is my desired state for them. And that process, depending on how important the pitch is, can take anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. With my 25 people that were pitching for a $700 million deal, that's a half-day process where 25 people are in a Zoom room with me, and we're all working together on trying to work out who are all the stakeholders, what are they looking for, what does the tender document say, what does all the other supporting information say, and what can we read between the lines about where everybody is on this panel that's going to choose us or not. The second phase is the design phase. And there's a lot of different formulas that you can use to craft your message in the most persuasive, interesting, and clear way. So that's phase 2, and then phase 3 is the delivery. So do you see what I mean? If you've done phase 1 and phase 2 really well, then your delivery is probably going to be awesome. Your eye contact will be great. Your gestures will reinforce what you're saying. Your body language will probably be all right too. I mean, there's lots of advanced stuff. I take 8 hours in a masterclass to teach body language. But don't get me wrong, it's still important, and there's lots to learn. But I think you've got to get those first 2 phases right first.
Yeah, and it sounds like there is a lot of presentation, not a lot, but there is time that you need to be able to take to do this initial work, and not just sort of dive in and just go, well, let's just wing it.
Yeah, I think winging it shows a profound lack of respect for the audience, whether that's one person or many people. Winging it says to me, I don't care about this enough to put the effort in. When you see the difference, I mean, even in a course, I have 10 people in a course, and some of those people craft up the most amazing, well-written presentations, and then they rehearse them, and then they turn up on the second day to present them, and they blow everyone's bananas because they're so good, and everyone's got this kind of secret jealousy about that because they see their colleague and they go, oh, wow, that person really smashed it. And then they didn't. They didn't do that. So they kind of wrote the presentation. They didn't really think about it too much. They came up with all the excuses and the procrastination in the world about why they were too busy to actually put some effort to that. And then when they actually got up to present, understandably, they were mildly disappointed that they weren't as good as some of their colleagues who got up at 5:30 that morning to rehearse. you know.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I really think, and an audience can sniff that a mile away. If you're pitching and you haven't thought it through. I mean, I've got a classic story about this. One of my clients turned up to a meeting. She thought it was just a meeting with her and someone else. She didn't really think too much about the business. She didn't realize it was a big contract. And when she walked into the boardroom, it had the whole C-suite. CEO, CIO, CTO, CFO, see everything.
Oh,
They were all in the room. They all handed over their cards, and she was on the inside going, "Oh my God,
my
I'm so
goodness.
unprepared for this." You know.
Yes.
Luckily, in that moment, she's what we call an eagle. She's very credible. She had all the experience in the world, and she could pivot on a 5-cent coin. So she was able to turn it
Fantastic.
on and do a good job. But
Yes.
you never want that feeling, right, where you've turned up to a pitch and you're unprepared like that. Very
Yeah.
stressful.
Oh, I can only imagine. I would have just gone, We need another coffee." and and a
Yeah.
dash of something else in there. And so, like, how, and I'm sure you train a lot of sales teams and all. I mean, we deal with real estate agents, we've got buyers agents, and they're
Mm.
continually, like, how do, I mean, in terms of presenting and sales skills, or for, I mean, tactics, I don't
Mm.
really like the word tactics, but is there much of
Mm.
a difference there in terms of how you're training people in sales teams?
It's so interesting, I don't think of myself as a sales trainer. And if someone asked me for sales skills, I'd probably put them to a colleague that I know. I wouldn't even think that was my expertise. But I think the world is changing. And certainly in Australia and New Zealand, we're not really flash on a pushy salesperson
Mm,
approach. And that's where persuasion can be very important. There's been a banking and finance royal commission in Australia, and that industry is under a lot of pressure. How do you help? You can't say that you're trying to sell to a customer. If you're a financial advisor, you can't say that you're trying to sell to a customer. If you're
mm,
a real estate agent, you're allowed to say that. It's an ethical part of your job is to sell the property, right? That's your job, and everyone
mm,
knows that. But in finance, it's not really thought of as ethical if you're trying to sell to someone. But at the
yeah,
same time, if you've got a couple and they're just procrastinating and they can't really make a decision, and you know that the thing you're pitching to them is going to help them to grow their wealth,
mm,
and like where's the line there about how forceful you are? I think if you were using sales tactics in that financial services kind of example, it probably wouldn't work. You probably
mm,
wouldn't get the customer over the line. You probably wouldn't be able to help them to invest the way you think they should. Persuasion in that moment is going to be very helpful.
mm.
So yes, I mean, there's a lot of crossover. Don't get me wrong. My presentation skills course, analysis, design, delivery. That's pretty much what you need to be a good salesperson, to be honest. Where I think there are some tactics, and they're probably not sales tactics. They're more like negotiation skills
Mm,
tactics.
mm.
Like always flinch. I remember when I used to teach negotiation skills 100 years ago. Rule number 1: always flinch. Whatever the offer is, always go, seriously?
Oh, that's a good one. I need to use that more. Yes,
So I would never
always
teach
flinched.
that in persuasion.
Yeah,
There's something just not quite right about that. So,
yeah.
but then there are other tactics where, yes, I think there probably is an overlap. Like I remember learning about the hot potato tactic. Do you know about that, Cheryl?
No, no, I don't. Please tell more.
Customer throws you a hot potato, right? So imagine it's a potato, it's covered in foil and it's burning hot because it's been in the
Yeah.
barbecue or something. What would you do? You wouldn't catch it and burn your fingers. If someone threw you a hot potato, what would you do?
Oh, what?
You'd push it back,
Sure,
wouldn't you?
push away. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Drop what? Drop it,
Yeah.
or yeah.
Yeah. So when someone gives you a problem, don't take it on, push it back.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
that is the same in persuasion. It's just, again, there are 4 different approaches to persuasion. And if you're using the hot potato tactic, the way you do that would change depending on whether it was 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the approaches. Mm.
Amazing, excellent, Michelle. So, I'm conscious that we're probably almost up to our time with our virtual coffee. How can people work with you and find out more about how to learn these skills? Because I just feel, and I know it's so important for all of us in business, no matter what, because every single day, like you said, we're persuading in some way or form. And more so now that this need to build personal brand and credibility, we just need to be able to present well and and reflect our businesses so much better. How can people work with you, Michelle?
Well, I'd love for people to attend my 2-day Persuasive Presentation Skills Masterclass. We run them in Sydney. We're hoping once lockdown finishes that we'll be able to start running them live in December. So we've already scheduled dates and we have people registered for those ones, and then all through next year. My book is available on my website, How to Present. And so if you want to buy my book, send me a note and say, I've just bought your book, and I'll sign it to you and wrap it as a gift. I also would love for people to really start to think about their own persuasive strengths and weaknesses. Where are you strong and where are you weak? And what are the 4 approaches? If you complete the Persuasion Smart profile, which again is on my website, then you would have a better insight into your own strengths, and that sets you up to just be awesome when it comes to persuading others. And there's lots of free resources for people who just don't want to spend money at the moment. There's lots of free resources on my website, which is www.michellebowden.com.au. I'd love to help in any way I can.
Too easy, Michelle. Thank you. That was absolutely fantastic, and it's got me all sort of G'd up as well, because I'm like, okay, when I present, because I've got a presentation next week, and it's
yes.
oh, this is self-serving, by the way. But the whole point of be prepared and be able to put yourself in people's shoes so that you can think, because at the end of the day, you're serving someone.
Yeah, that's absolutely. It's all about the audience. And for your presentation next week, Cheryl, tip number 1, always start with an icebreaker. An interesting fact, an interesting figure. 3 steps to an icebreaker: hook, intro, welcome. So there's a free tip for everybody. Hook, intro, welcome. So an interesting stat, introduce yourself, and then hook, intro, link is the model. So hook the audience's attention with a stat, introduce yourself or welcome them to the meeting, and then link it to what you're going to talk about in the meeting. What the example I often say, if we laid all the Scotch finger biscuits that we manufacture in 1 year from end to end, they'd stretch from Sydney to New York. What a lot of Scotch finger biscuits. I'm Michelle, and welcome to our meeting today on the manufacture of our sweet biscuit range here at Arnott's. So hook, intro, link. What are you going to talk about? And that will set you up, Cheryl, for being awesome next week.
Thank you. That is absolute gold. Just in great. Thank you so much,
Thanks
Michelle.
for having me.
I'll let you know how I go as well. So, thank you, anyone in the audience. Thank you for joining us for virtual coffee. Reach out to Michelle, michellebowden.com.au. She has a wealth of experience, and there's so many free resources there, like she mentioned as well. Get into it. Thanks, Michelle. Have a fantastic week and a wonderful Wednesday. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.